By way of introduction, I just wanted to say, my name is Reuwai, Hanewald, and my family's farm is about 10 minutes down the road. And I'm happy to follow Daniel because I also am a Princeton alum coming from a farming family and grew up on a family farm. In fact, my family, I'm the 11th generation in central New Jersey farming. And on my family's farm, my sister is with me and my parents, and we both have our 3 kids. And this long view of agriculture, I think, comes inherent to folks like Daniel and I who live on a farm, but we're hoping is inherent to those who care for the planet, and why I'm so thrilled with today's kind of topical focus. So in that vein, it's also shaped by, at Princeton, I was an ecology evolutionary biology degree, so I'm thrilled to see what our professors are still up to, but also in environmental science. So taking all that perspective, I think there's something gained by hearing from the folks who are on the producing side, on the ground of running the restaurants, the farms, the product industry that's so closely tied into this issue, obviously. We're really fortunate to have these speakers. They have such a varied background and have done so much, so you can actually, you can find them on the web, and there's so much to learn about them. But we really are keeping the focus today on the climate change, on the global emissions, and there's so many parts of these topics, but that will be kind of the central focus. And the driving question of how can we have accessible, affordable food that's sustainable? A lofty goal in question, but one that all of these 4 are kind of working towards. So we're going to hear from each of them and then open it up to questions, and we're just going down the line. They nicely set themselves up in the way it's presented in the panel. So we'll, actually, no, you switched. Okay, so David's going to be first. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much, Reuwai. So my name is David Benzaquen. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Plant-Based Solutions, and our primary business is as a brand management and marketing agency for plant-based consumer products, mostly foods and beverages. In addition, we run a syndicate of investment funds that invest in these kinds of products. We are part owners in a supermarket chain that is all plant-based in Hong Kong and China, a distribution company in about 15 countries, and manufacturing facilities in Mexico and India producing plant-based foods to sell into those parts of the world. So while I am not a producer, a restaurateur, a chef, I am a taster, and I get to taste a lot, and that makes me very happy. So in speaking a little bit about the things that are happening on the production side, which I'm surrounded by because of all my clients, it is a very exciting time to be choosing to make sustainable choices about what you eat. I do want to step back for 1 second to the last panel and something that I asked about and something that I also want to push back against on myself. I mentioned that we don't necessarily need to embrace identities, but I think I want to speak about 2 different audiences here today. And that audience is those of us who are here today and those of us who are not. And the reason I make that distinction is because by coming into this room and choosing to engage with these issues, you're suggesting that you already are stepping beyond a stigma, and that you're already choosing to embrace difficult, complex questions and engage in thinking about how you can make a difference. And so while I said that we don't have to, and you certainly don't have to choose to identify yourself by a particular identity, I will suggest that there is something powerful in being proud of making decisions that are ethical, sustainable, and healthy. And there is something that is powerful about choosing to stand up for what is right and good and better for the world. And I'm a proud feminist, I'm a proud anti-racist, I'm proud of a lot of things. And so while I said that everybody does not have to choose to use a label like vegetarian or vegan, I'm very proud to use one of those labels, the label vegan, because I believe that it is representative of compassion, not just for animals, also for people, for myself, for the world. And so I think we should engage with how choosing to represent those movements, those identities, and doing so and modeling it in a way that doesn't make people feel judged or excluded is the answer, not necessarily eschewing pride in moving the world forward. So, moving on to production, we're seeing a ton of incredible innovation in the plant-based world, both in terms of things that do replicate the taste, texture, and mouthfeel of meat, dairy, and eggs, and other products that do not, but that provide other wholesome, healthy options. Some of the great innovations we're seeing, I'm a part owner in a company called Ocean Hugger Foods, which has 3 products that have been developed and one on the market called tomato sushi, which is a raw bluefin tuna alternative made with just 5 ingredients, all of which you not only can pronounce but have in your cabinet or fridge. One of them is organic Roma tomatoes, rice wine vinegar, gluten-free tamari, unrefined sugar, and filtered water. So those are all the ingredients. It's developed by a certified master chef who is a 2-time Michelin star winner and a James Beard Award winner, and he's my co-owner in the business. That product is going to be launching worldwide very soon. We have 2 other products coming out. One is called eggplant unagi, which is, for those who don't know, unagi is eel as served in a raw fashion for sushi and other preparations. The third is smoked salmon made out of carrots. And we have many more to come. Actually, the next product we're looking at is outside of the fish alternative realm, but still in the ocean. Certain algae and seaweeds are harvested in unsustainable ways, particularly those that are harvested in Vietnam and in China, though I certainly don't want to suggest that it's only true there, but they are harvested using similar methods to shrimp, using trawling nets that can destroy coral reefs, and that can and many times those plants can contain heavy metals. We are actually looking at alternative sources of those things, but in addition to finding alternative sources of seaweeds and algae, we are also producing land-based, organic, U.S.-grown vegetables and cooking them or processing them very lightly with just traditional kitchen equipment to give them the taste and texture of seaweeds and algae. So there are lots of innovations happening there that I'm very excited to see. Another category that I think you should all check out is the cheese alternative category. I'm very excited about innovation there. Some very clean, delicious products like cashew cheeses that really can go toe-to-toe with any of the best cheeses in the world. Recently at the Fancy Food Show this past summer, which is one of the world's biggest events for this industry, it was the first time that a non-dairy cheese from a producer called Miyoko's Kitchen was featured in Best Cheese of the Year category. It was the runner-up. It never occurred before, and so I'm very excited about those growths. One other area that I don't work with directly, but that is also innovation or potential innovation in production that I think I'll point out, which can also have significant impact on climate change, is the production of animal proteins using synthetic biology. It is not by nature or definition plant-based, so it is not a large focus of my work, but these are opportunities to develop things that are biologically identical to animal proteins, but without inputs from animals and without having to grow, feed, transport, slaughter animals and use unbelievable amount of resources to do that. Before I close really quickly, and then we can go back to everything, I just want to throw out 4 resources that I highly recommend to everybody to engage with these questions about how we move people in these directions. One is the book by Gene Bauer called Farm Sanctuary, Changing Hearts and Minds About Animals and Food. Another is Doing Good Better by William McCaskill. The third is Nick Cooney's book, Change of Heart, What Psychology Can Teach Us About Spreading Social Change. And the last is Melanie Joy's book. She's a psychologist, and she wrote a book called Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows. So those are some fantastic resources. That's it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Hi there. I didn't think it was possible to talk faster than David, but I'll give it a shot here. An interesting story is I happen to be Daniel's father. One of the differences between Daniel and I didn't grow up on a farm. I grew up in an industrial inner city wasteland, and I trained in ecology, and so I kind of bring a different perspective to agriculture than you guys might be familiar with, so kind of bear with me on this. For the past 800 million years or so, or maybe 6,000 years, depending on which reference books you read, this has been the age of the mammals, and there's been animals all over this planet. They are the drivers of the ecosystem function, and the fertility cycling. They're eating trees, they're eating grasses, et cetera, et cetera. What if all of a sudden our planet was an ecological paradise again, like it has been for the past 800 million years? It would probably look a lot like this, with animals all over the place. They're an essential, critical role in the ecology of our world. One of the latecomers to this whole animal kingdom thing is this animal, the human animal, which for the majority of its period of time, it was much like the other animals. It existed within its ecosystem. It ate what its natural foods were. But in a brief instant in our own human history, all of a sudden diets changed, our societies changed, and we went from eating mostly perennial plants, fruits and nuts and berries, and minimal animal products to eating annual grains and legumes. And in order to grow annual crops at all, you have to destroy a perennial ecosystem. You have to clear cut a forest, you have to bulldoze or burn a savanna, plow up a prairie in order to grow our annual crops. This may look like deforestation, but this has actually been replanted with trees. It'll be allowed to grow back into a forest. This is just a massive clear cut. It's not deforestation. This is deforestation. This forest was cut down, burned, chopped up, plowed out, and the ground's been plowed year after year after year after year. And it's not involved in an ecological process other than degradation. The soil is blowing away in the wind, it's washing away in the rain. All to grow this stuff. Half of our planet's surface is covered with this stuff. It's an annual plant. It grows for a few short months. It produces a lot of hard seeds. This is a crime against ecology. This is a crime against the planet itself. What's fascinating about it, in the U.S. anyways alone, 80%, a full 80% of our grain crop goes to feed animals. And this is a crime against animals. These guys aren't even adapted or evolved to eat grains. First of all, it takes about 10 pounds of grain to produce 1 pound of beef. That's also a travesty against humanity. Again, a crime against humanity when we actually have 900% more food available for people to eat. And we're feeding it to cows instead. And they're not adapted or evolved or created to digest this because they're missing 2 critical organs in their body. The 2 critical organs for digesting these seeds, these hard seeds from annual grains, are a crop and a gizzard. Birds have those. Chickens can eat grains. It's perfectly fine for them. It's normal for them. When looking at animals, and the human animal counts as well, we also look at their dentition. We can tell what an animal eats by their digestive tract and their dentition. We have no crop or gizzard. Cows have no crop or gizzard. Cows down here in the lower left over there, way tons of molars, no canines at all. The dog and the cat, they've got canines for grabbing prey and tearing meat apart. Cows have huge bunches of molars for grinding coarse plant parts. Well, let's look at the dentition of a human being. We have 32 teeth, approximately 16 molars. We're designed to eat 50% of our foods are supposed to be plants that we chew on. Maybe 38%, which is our incisors, is for biting fruit. And we have maybe 12% tearing some meat off of the bones. So that is the animal human, how its digestive tract is designed. It's short, it's high acid, so it's designed to have a quick bypass. We're not designed to eat this stuff. We're not designed to feed it to cows. Cows are not designed to eat this stuff. We have to destroy our environment in order to grow this. A fascinating sidebar, every culture that has based its staple food crops diet, its carbohydrates, proteins, and oils, on annual plants has ended in collapse. Grows just like an annual plant, grows real fast, eradicates its resource base, cuts down all the forests, plows up all the land, blows it all away, makes weapons of war. At the end times, they have to make more coliseums to sporting events and live, reality TV and stuff, bread and circus. And then we have to have work projects, things that are fear-based because the bad guys are going to come and get us. Let's make a big wall just to keep people busy from killing each other when we're actually killing the planet and ourselves. What if we were to design our, can you hand me the water, please? What if we were to design our agriculture after natural systems? Let's do ecological restoration, which is where my background came from educationally. Let's do land conversion the other way around. Let's go back to these degraded landscapes like this, and let's replant stuff like this. This whole question bugged me for a long period of time. When I got out of college, it was the Reagan administration. They were assassinating ecologists. So I went to the land and tried to do this myself in the laboratory of my own life. And this poor kid has had to eat this way all of his life. I wrote about it in a book, not because I thought I knew anything, but because people were like, what are you talking about? And I just had to explain myself. So the essence of restoration agriculture is we're going to go to degraded landscapes, we're going to do ecological restoration and provide food by using natural systems. We're going to imitate our natural plant community of where we are. Where we moved in southwest Wisconsin is right smack dab in the oak savanna region of North America, which is characterized by the following plant community. And no matter where you live on planet Earth, there's a plant community that will support humans in a perennial form. There is, everywhere that humans have ever lived. Starting up high with the tall trees, your oak, chestnut, or beech. I chose chestnut because there's ready markets for it. It has regular crops unlike the oak or the beech. Understory of apples. And this is all natural, native stuff. You can plant this as a system, and it grows all by itself. No inputs required whatsoever. Hazelnuts is an understory shrub. Then the prunus's, cherries and peaches and apricots, and so on. Almonds, where almonds grow. Raspberries, blackberries, grapes, currants, gooseberries, that sort of thing. Then the green grass grows all around, and there are animals involved in the system. Now, all this carbon that we're sequestering on the site, we have to decompose it somehow. It's going to decompose anyways. Let's use edible and medicinal fungi. This is a 100% perennial system. It's modeled after the ecosystem itself that has been here for 800 zillion years. And what's interesting about the animals, it's not a farm that raises animals for meat. The animals are the tool in the ecosystem that keeps this system going. We don't even have to eat the animals, but we're going to use them to mow the grass, to clean up disease-infected fruit, to do some pruning for us, and for nutrient cycling. So we want to imitate our natural plant communities and sell the products therefrom. Well, how does one little farm in the middle of Wisconsin sell its products? I need some kind of marketing wing. So what farmers need to do when we're doing these restoration agriculture systems is band together. I happen to be grower number 24 of a small little co-op that started as a vegetable racket in southwest Wisconsin. That when I first joined, we could all fit around 2 picnic tables. We had this dream of someday having $1 million in sales. Past 2 years, we've crossed $1 billion in sales each year, and that's Organic Valley. And so what we ended up doing, for real, this really actually happened. We plopped down in the middle of corn and beans country, imitated our natural ecosystem, and using the agroforestry practices, did a land conversion the other way. And this is a restored oak savanna that pays its own way, fed our family fairly well, provides about this much plant material to chew on, about these many fruits and nuts and berries, and uses the animals as the management structures within the system. And we think that this is the kind of agriculture that we would like to encourage everybody to think about. It's not an either or. It's not like leave the animals completely out of it or include the animals totally and go paleo. What about creating ecological systems that provides a whole suite of full, complete human nutritious diet? And I think that those of us involved, we're crazy enough to think that we can do something about the world.
Hi. Can you hear me? Okay. My name is Constantine Katsifis, and I have the pleasure of following Mark. So I thought I would speak to you today about my experiences of running a New Jersey diner and several diners throughout New Jersey, and hopefully that can contribute to the discussion. So naturally, sustainably grown and harvested, thoughtfully prepared food is delicious, but it's very expensive. And I have, if anybody has any questions, I have tons of statistical knowledge about how much more expensive organic spinach might be versus commercially available spinach and such, which we'll do in the question and answer session. But it's expensive. And with the pressure on restaurants to keep prices down constantly and to follow this trend of forever growing portions, it becomes very difficult for typical restaurants to join in the conversation, like we're having today, about how to improve the food that we are serving to the public. So there's a tremendous amount of downward pressure on price, and that's one of the things that makes it a little bit difficult to have more restaurants participate in sourcing and preparing sustainable and thoughtfully prepared food. On a side note, it also prevents us in many ways from providing sustainable living wages for people who work in the industry, but that's probably another topic and maybe something we could bring up in the future one day. But the typical lunch counter conversation between an operator and a supplier will surround itself around something. The operator asks the supplier, how much is your price of ketchup, and followed by how much is the price of French fries, how much is the price of those high fructose corn syrup little jelly packets that you sell, and so on. And so this is the conversation that's happening, unfortunately, in restaurants. My hopes are that we can extend this conversation to further than just this auditorium, and to really get people thinking about how to provide better food for more people, and make it accessible, and and have it be affordable. So over the last 25 years of running the Americana Diner, we took a slightly different approach, and we decided that we're not going to get involved in the race to the bottom and try to constantly be cheaper than competition, pile more food on a plate, etc. And we decided that we were going to try to make an effort to be better. And later, with the invaluable help of working with Craig Shelton, we expanded better to include better for the grower, better for the environment, better for our employees, and better for the customer. We just have to be careful about how we message the idea of better for them, because we do find that there is this resistance to people being told how to behave, and I think some of the psychologists earlier alluded to those things very nicely earlier. So what we've done, and one of the psychologists mentioned the idea of changing the defaults, and we just slowly changed the defaults without really discussing them with our guests. And when we did that, we had our best results. Things like changing high fructose corn syrup beverages, make those the minority. Offer many selections of beverages that are not just sodas and things like that are high fructose corn syrup. We replaced things like automatic French fries with every sandwich with like a credit towards any side of vegetable. So if you want a vegetable, or you want a salad, or you want a soup, that made a pretty big difference for our customers. And by changing that, whereas 100% of all sandwiches were served with French fries, we're down to about 25% of all sandwiches are served with French fries. 75% of our customers opt for better choices. And we're not located here in Princeton, where people are as thoughtful about food and nutrition as you are. We replaced ketchup with a slow roasted tomato on a plate with an omelet, so that we can suggest to the guests that they use that instead of pouring ketchup and squeezing the bottle all over it, so that they would get that highly palatable flavor of sugar and vinegar combined. We switched from artificial pancake syrup, which is another form of corn, to pure maple syrup, and we were able to do it without adjusting price by combining pure maple syrup and the butter together, so that we were able to give 50 milliliters of delicious maple butter, which is just enough and flavorful enough that you can eat your pancakes and not wonder why you get that awful feeling you have when you just have that big charge of high fructose corn syrup in your plate of food. We changed to organic grass-fed beef from anything else but that. I can't even explain it. And when we did that, it started a chain reaction. So the minute we changed to an organic grass-fed beef burger, that we were able, at one point, we were able to get it, the whole steer from a local farmer, but the supply chain isn't quite set up to do that for us yet, and hopefully that's maybe to you guys, we can work on that. So when it started a chain reaction. So the moment you grill the burger that's freshly ground organic grass-fed beef, you immediately identify that, well, something's wrong with that cheese on top of that burger because it looks like plastic. And then you upgrade the cheese that you're having, and then you think a little bit about the lettuce that's on there, and then the tomatoes on there, and finally you have, what I think is a fantastic burger, which doesn't make you feel like you've done something wrong by eating it. So the math on the burger is is pretty simple. Organic grass-fed beef costs 500% more than commercially available beef. So one of the things that what we did over the last 25 years is we never really thought about ingredient cost, how you buy it in a case. We thought about, well, what does that do and how does that affect the cost on the plate? So something like 500% more in beef can be pretty frightening for someone who's just trying to figure out, working with small margins, trying to make sure that we're taking care of our employees. How do you figure out how do you do that? And what we ended up doing was we said, well, look, the portion was wrong to begin with. So we shouldn't be serving 8 ounces of beef. Maybe we should serve 6. And maybe we should, and so when you compare the two things, the actual cost was $1 more. So if we just add on $1 more onto that plate cost, we covered the cost of being able to do it, and that's how we kind of moved forward, and we were able to serve what I think is a better product, and it's better for everybody, especially the people who are at this table. And then another thing we want to point out, and I'll be done, was we stopped asking guests questions like, would you like to wrap that? I always found that in our facility, we compost. We've been composting for 20 years, where all the food waste that comes back to the kitchen, which we always evaluate, because if there's so much coming back to the kitchen, you should, one, consider do they like it, and 2, is the portion correct? But we just stopped asking that question, and we didn't put guests on the spot to do it. We hoped that they would finish eating their food to begin with. And that made a very big difference in the amount of plastics and things like that we were turning around and putting back into our customers' kitchens, that they would keep in the refrigerator for a little while and then throw out afterwards. So these are the kind of changes that we would do over time, and we don't get into any trouble when we do this until we start talking about it and preaching about it to our customers. It just seems that that's not the conversation they want to have. So, any advice anyone has about how to sell it better, I would welcome that. Thank you.
Daniel, could you put the picture of the solar system back up on the screen? I think it's Mark's screensaver, isn't it? The solar system? I asked myself coming here why the moon would decided I needed to be at Princeton to speak on a panel about food, and I have just been blessed with my answer. I know where to go to get the diner experience, and I was looking for in New York City. I tip my hat to you, Constantine. Well, that'll be all right, too. The other one is a screensaver. It sort of shows the whole universe. I think it was up there a minute, but that one of the bubble blowing would be fine, too. I just made it go black. So, I'm from Virginia, if you can't tell by my accent already. And Jefferson's a hero of mine, and we claim a little bit of blood relation. And I've been on my farm, like Reuwai's been there for many, many generations. Our families drank the same water and connected to the soil in the same way for a long time, in good ways and bad ways. We have a history. We have a history of chopping down the trees and like Mark said, planting seeds in order to be able to store that up and get ahead and make it through the winter, because we're scared. We're scared of that scarcity. I also wanted to tell my friend that down here, that's the vegan, that the most spiritually attuned teachers in my life have all been vegan. They were also my girlfriends, but I couldn't actually date them because they have 4 legs and they ate nothing but grass. So I have an utmost respect for vegans. And in the grand scheme of things, and with this picture of the universe here, we are all just the products of a dying star. There's no more solid truth than that. I asked myself, as I said, why the moon's going to guide me to Princeton to talk on a panel. And I said, well, I've spoken on a panel with a couple of Harvard graduates. Maybe that qualifies me. And then I saw this guy from Princeton. I presume you're from Princeton, had a Harvard slide up there, the speaker from earlier. Oh, I'm from Baltimore. Oh, he's from Baltimore. Okay, so you let him off the hook. But I said, that can't be what it is. And I love listening to doctors speak. But I don't have a doctorate degree myself. I have what's called a PhD, and I earned it from about 15 years of farming. It's a personal humility degree. And you know, I got to thinking about the word humility, and to be honest, etymologically, it doesn't quite transfer to human. Because if you go back to the original word, it doesn't actually start with HU, it starts with HY. But it was confirming to see Mark put some pictures up there that had some dirt in it. Because if we think about ourselves, what we call ourselves as humans, and human comes from humus, and humus is dirt. And it's simple. We need to go back and listen to what the dirt's trying to tell us and stop running away in the other direction. We do it to ourselves, you know. We fail to go inside on the inward journeys. Rilke says the most important journey is the inward journey. And we fail to do that because we're so good at being hubristic, right? That's another HU word. I'm not sure if they're connected. But mainly what I do is work with farmers. After being a farmer so long, I've gotten to the point where I was able to share my good, prosperous life with another family. And they run the farm now. And my heart guided me out into the world to help other farmers convert to organic practices. And, you know, I've kind of got past the why of what I'm doing. And I want to talk a little bit about, you know, what it is we're doing. So, you know, a lot of young mothers now are making choices for their families, and they may have all the information in the world in their pocket, but they don't often understand that information because they've never been connected back to the land. You know, there's a lot of missing links that we give up for our security and our insulation. But there has been quite a lot of confidence gained over the years in the USDA organic seal. And the important part about organics is you can't cheat the system. And it's important that you all, being the tip of the spear, understand this and never settle for anything less than a farming system that is going to nourish our mother, our soil, our souls, you know. Life and love aren't too far apart either. And we're created with so many neurons in our guts that we probably could do pretty good just listening to our stomachs a little bit. And organic agriculture has to do that. We have to go into the soil and look what's there. We have to find our baseline. And what we found, at least on my farm a decade ago, was soils that were run down to less than 2% organic matter. And how do we build that back up? The reason I asked to put this slide back up is not so I could come off as a cosmic guru. It is because, well, maybe I am a cosmic guru. It's because there's more life in a teaspoon of, there's as much life, I shouldn't say as more, there's as much life in a teaspoon of soil as there are stars on that screen right there. I don't know if anybody tried to count them because they were so bored of listening to me talk. I think we missed the point. We missed the point that we have to feed the soil if we want to have better food, whether we choose to be vegans, whether we choose to eat meat or not. And that's important. That's the life we can't see, you know. But our heart is still connected atavistically to that soil. And we need to start thinking about the soil in this country because we're losing our most precious resource through the farming systems that we're choosing so insanely to continue to propagate by trying to turn Mother Nature into a bank, which she is not. She just isn't. So I'll conclude by saying that my favorite philosopher is, well, I guess he'd be my second favorite philosopher is Voltaire, because he was a big one for Jefferson. And I often get frustrated with modern day philosophers when they try to critique Voltaire's work. Had anybody read Candide? There's Princeton. Somebody had to read Candide. So I hope I came across as a total optimist, because I am. And what a great thing here to have this, this food revolution is happening, and you guys are the point of the spear. But Voltaire, at the end of his book, well, I'm an optimist. Voltaire basically chaps optimists' butt all through Candide. He thinks they're just the most ridiculous thing that ever happened to the world was an optimist. But at the end, he simply states, let us tend to our garden. And I believe that he quite literally meant, let us tend to our garden. You know, it's not that difficult. Go out and grow something, and you will learn. You will gain your PhD like I have, your personal humility degree. They ought to require that for everyone to get a real PhD. But Organic Valley is a great organization. We like Mark said, one of my heroes. They started as 7 guys in the 80s that were down and out. It was the farm crisis. Interest rates were high. People were losing their farms. And they developed a model where they went to the marketplace. They were actually produce guys. Probably some of them were vegans. They went to the market and asked for a fair, sustainable pay price. And they did that, and the market responded, and we've grown to 1,900 farms. I think over 1 million acres have been transitioned. I personally work with a lot of in the Amish community in Southeast Pennsylvania. Young farmers that are very eager to stay on farms can actually buy a small farm and make a living. Most of our average herd size on the dairy size, we do meat, produce, eggs, mainly dairy, is about 70 cow operations. Very small, sustainable farms. And I'll just say thank you again, and I'm honored to be on the panel and glad to speak to everyone.
These 4 didn't give you a lot to think about, so maybe we'll start with you all had any questions, but I'm sure they have some themselves.
Just to answer one of Terry's comments, Dave Engel, one of the founding members of Organic Valley, is a vegan dairy farmer.
Yeah, there you go.
Doesn't even touch his own stuff.
I love it.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Harris. I'm the president of the Northeast Organic Farming Association of New Jersey. I want to thank the organizers for finally putting on some organic perspectives in some of your panels. So thank you so much for being here. I wanted to take your comments about humus and work it into what this conference was about, which is sustainability and reduction of greenhouse gases, and comment on both the Rodale Institute and Iowa State data, which are showing that taking cover cropping and no-till agriculture increases the carbon sequestration in the soil, as well as when you don't introduce chemicals, you increase the microbial activity, which then increases the plant productivity, as well as the nutritional quality of the food. So I would like for you to be able to comment on whether or not you're familiar with this aspect and how we can promote these aspects of regenerative agriculture to our farmers, both in state and around the country. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you brought a little logic to my philosophy there on humus. for sure. So building humus is basically putting organic matter, and no-till, no chemical farming is definitely one of them. How many of you all take a probiotic or eat yogurt? So you do that to contribute to the beneficial bacteria that help you digest your food. It's sort of the same thing with farming. We wouldn't drink chemicals. Why do we pour them on our soils? But building humus is also very important for keeping soil structure together and allowing. See, part of the problem with our food is that we have allowed it to erode to just farming with 3 elements. Can anybody tell me what those 3 elements are? NPK. So go home and have a big plate full of NPK. That ain't going to do a darn bit of good for you when you need the whole periodic table. We're supposed to be part of a system of lots of different elements. The reason we need that humus to build in the organic matter to build in the soil so that the remineralization of the soil, the life in the soil is what builds the minerals in the soil.
I just wanted to comment quickly with the humus. We're not only sequestering carbon in the soil using cover cropping techniques like that in perennial pasture. If we looked at the cornfield that I showed, or the wheat field that went for miles and miles and miles, that's only, even if that was certified organic, that's still not dealing with the above ground sequestration, the benefit that we get from trees and shrubs and bushes and vines. And so it's the agroforestry practices and techniques that combine both in a synergistic system so that we don't lose yields on our crops that we're growing beneath the tree cover, and we're getting all the benefits of having the long-term carbon sequestration in the trees. And if Organic Valley were to plant chestnut trees along every 40-acre fence row, we would be the largest chestnut producer on Earth. And I think it was like 30 billion tons of carbon per year would be taken out of the atmosphere.
David, this question is for you. In your opening remarks, you mentioned some products like salmon made out of carrots. Also out in the market, you see things like buffalo chicken and, whatnot, lamb. I wonder if by doing that, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this, if we are doing a disservice to these plant-based alternatives. So this is more of a marketing-related question, which is by having chicken, real chicken, next to fake chicken, we're automatically presenting a wrong choice to the consumers, and whether it makes more sense to market the alternatives as and by themselves versus a comparison to real meats. So my question is, the plant-based alternatives industry, are they still in a trial and error mode as far as marketing is concerned, or have we all decided this is the best way to market such products?
Great, thank you for the question. I've probably done more proprietary research on this exact question than anybody in the world because I specialize in marketing meat, dairy, and egg alternatives. The answer is it really depends on the audience that you're speaking to, and for some people, there are people who do want to experience the taste, texture, mouthfeel, and cultural association that one has with eating a meat, dairy, or egg product. And so as most people are choosing to eat less or no animal products because of health and sustainability and not because just because of animals, there are different audiences that have different feelings about it. But I think it can go in both directions. There are times where celebrating foods in and of themselves can be fantastic. There are times when introducing things as we call transitional foods that allow people to engage in a welcoming way can make a big difference. But to your point about whether something is marketed as an alternative or replacement or quote unquote a fake version of something, I want to bring up one example of a campaign that I think was the most effective marketing campaign we ever did. We work with a company called Gardein. We've been their brand management agency now for 4 years. Actually, we worked with them before we were the brand management agency. We were like a side agency for them. Now we're their official brand management agency. And it's about a $250 million annual revenue company making a large range of meat alternatives. On the packaging, it used to be called meat alternative. And I had a theory that was preventing or de-incentivizing people who ate meat from consuming it. And so we did some focus groups, and we presented people with the package before they tasted the product and with the marketing materials. And I asked people what they thought of it. They said, oh, it looks nice, nice packaging, looks like a good product, but I wouldn't eat it. We said, why? And they said, because I like meat, why should I replace it? And we thought about it, and so we put together some concept boards, which you do when you're doing focus groups of, here are different versions of ways we could present this, and which would be most attractive to you, which is the one that's going to be most likely to incentivize you to eat this. And when we changed the language from alternative to option, it changed everything. Now, if you look at Gardine's advertising campaigns and marketing campaigns, they speak about it as a protein option. And the reason that was so impactful, and I'll tell you a story, my family didn't know that they were one of my clients. And I went over to my sister's house for dinner one night, and she had her 4 kids and her husband, and she was cooking dinner. And she said, oh, you'll be excited. We have a vegetarian option tonight. We're having Gardine chicken. Have you heard of this company? I said, yeah, it's my client. And I said, why are you eating that? You eat chicken? And she said, yeah, but I want the kids to eat more vegetables, and I like that they're getting their protein anyway. So once a week we have that. And that was the exact intent, was we could say to people, fine, have your Taco Tuesdays, and that doesn't mean you can't have this. And if you look at the expansion of almond milk, 90% of people who drink almond milk also consume other dairy. And so by presenting people with delicious, affordable, convenient options that don't make them feel like they have to, though some of us can, choose to eschew all these products all the time, we can not push them towards our goal, but pull them towards the goal. And that's much more effective psychologically.
I like that. It's great.
All right, thank you for all your presentations. I want to mention something I think related with all of that, is that we are going to a world with a big climate change. And I wish everybody could eat organic, or I wish everybody could be vegan. But in 2007, United Nations says that to be able to feed the world by 2050, we need to increase the yield by 50%. And crop yield mainly of 50%, which is not unfeasible. But if we think of organic food, growing with a better soil will probably increase our yield by 10%. So we're still missing probably 40%. And considering exactly what you said about almond milk, and I'm a drinker myself because I'm lactose intolerant, but I don't think that that's sustainable, because if you look at California, for example, that's where most of the almond trees are growing, but it's using all the water from the soil, and the problem is almond tree needs a lot of water. So, in the sustainable aspect for the future, I think we just focus on one aspect of what we want to do. And if we can imagine a world where everybody will be vegan, then I don't think the yield for agriculture should be increased by 50%, but probably by 80 or 90%. And under climate change, it sounds unreasonable or very difficult to do. So I'm just wondering if you have any comment on that.
I'd be glad to comment, but first I have to say it's a travesty for a Frenchman to be lactose intolerant. I think you ought to try some raw milk, maybe. That might help.
I know, I'm past 25. I'm not supposed to.
Yeah.
Like Dave anyway.
So there's a great example close by here. Rodale Institute's not too far from here in Pennsylvania, and they've done side-by-side trials, and they've showed equal yields in row crops, literally in the same field. One side is managed organically, one side is managed conventionally. And in the beginning, before the soil came back to life, and before they started to remineralize the soil, before they started to nourish the life in it, that's why it takes 3 years to transition to organic, because it takes that long for Mother Nature to reestablish life back in the soil. So there have been side-by-side studies, and they're not the only one that show organic yield-wise can definitely keep pace with conventional ag. Does that sort of answer your question, or?
Well, what you just said is that the yield will be similar to what we have today, which I totally agree with.
Yeah.
But we still need to increase by 50%.
Then how my work addresses that is that those were some of the questions that really bugged me. What I find fascinating here, I'm a certified organic farmer for 20 years. All of those civilizations that have depended on annual grains that have collapsed, those were all organic. There were no chemicals.
That's true.
We got the yields that we have nowadays because of all the chemistry in our agriculture, so we can't say that that's like all wrong. Well, what both the organic and the chemical-based agricultures are missing is the fact that there are all kinds of other plants that we can eat that have seeds and fruits and nuts that grow in the third dimension, not just on the first dimension down here on the surface. We can have a shrub layer, middle tree layer, high tree layer, and then has anybody ever driven down the side of the road and seen trees growing out of the cliffs? Trees operate on different rules, really. They actually help to create the soil instead of requiring soil for their nutrients. And don't get me going about almonds in California. That's why we imitate the natural ecosystems. You grow what the natural plant communities are in that area. You design it such that it can be planted easily, managed easily, harvested easily. Almonds wouldn't be growing in California where they are today. Yeah.
I have a few thoughts I'd like to share on that before we jump to the next question. I apologize, Tim.
No.
First, on almonds in California, I don't want to speak to their being sustainable. I'm not an expert in that. However, the study that came out that challenged the water usage of almonds specifically was funded by the National Cattle Ranchers Association and specifically used caloric conversions to suggest that 1 calorie of almond milk was equivalent or was a certain amount of water relative to 1 calorie of beef. And that was problematic because the amount you need of almond milk to produce 1 calorie is very different than the amount of beef you need. And so the overall impact is much greater. The same thing has been done with, if you had 1,000 calories of kale and 1,000 calories of beef, it'd be almost the same amount of water. Well, yeah, try to get 1,000 calories of kale. So there are problematic studies in that. When it comes to restoring and increasing yields, here's what I know. We can band together and make wonderful decisions about our policy and how we move together as a world. In the meantime, every single one of us eats 3 or more times a day and has a fork and a wallet with which we make choices. And those choices can be incredibly powerful. And the fact that we don't know how we're going to get to that 40% doesn't mean that we shouldn't make those choices as often as possible. And when it comes to choosing plant-based options, the nice thing is not only are you doing something nice for your health and animals and everything else and making an individual change on climate change based on, the carbon emissions of cows or whatever else, when it comes specifically to crop yield, and this is very aligned with what these gentlemen are doing, we're talking about not only reducing the carbon of the animals themselves, but also preventing continuing deforestation, continuing destruction of land for grazing and for growing crops. The Amazon is being destroyed on an astronomical rate purely to grow grain to feed cows. So by not eating those cows, you are taking the money out of the farmers that are producing that way, and that land can be protected for sequestration, and further land can be protected also.
Very brief comment on the almond issue, which is that most of by far the largest water user in California is actually the alfalfa for the dairy industry. So I haven't done all the calculations, but but I have one question kind of for each of you. So I'm really curious to tell us more about chestnuts and what kinds of yields you get, what the uses are. I'm really interested. Are there opportunities to use native nuts to really have a larger effect? And then I have a question for David, which is, are you seeing, if plant-based alternatives were to go to scale, what do you see as the cost structure of that? Because today you go and the costs are similar, higher, whatever, do you see the opportunities there? And then I have a question for Constantine, which is, what experience have you had at all with regard to trying to sell alternatives to livestock products in your diamond?
I'll start and also address our fellow up here, the Frenchman, a little bit of his questions at the same time. Are there other options and alternatives with different tree-based nuts? Absolutely. There's companies all across the world in the United States right now that are based off of acorns, hickory nuts, black walnuts. That's just in the beginning. We don't have to necessarily like to eat those foods, but we can feed them to animals. And another thing about yield, company's name is Restoration Agriculture Development. I'm not looking for prime farmland. All these UN statistics that we need to increase these yields, they're talking about arable flat land. I'm talking about rocks and crags and eroded hillsides that we can actually grow crops on. You can't grow corn and beans, you can't grow agricultural crops, but you can grow plant communities that are adapted to it and then actually create the soil. Then we get the additive effect, the over-yielding polycultures effect. It's been shown over and over again ecologically that the system that has more total site yield per acre has more total species diversity. The more species, the more total site yield you get. So instead of just growing one crop, let's grow a multi-tiered system. We have additive yields. So the farm that I purchased used to get 160 bushels of corn per acre. That's about 8,000 pounds of corn. 80% of that goes to feed cows. So it only turns into 640 pounds of beef per acre. Well, if I grow chestnuts at 2,000 pounds an acre, hazelnuts at about 1,500 pounds an acre, I've got a couple hundred bushels of grapes, a couple hundred bushels of apples that I don't know the pounds conversion on it, and I've got grass growing all through it. I've got cows that have to mow my grass and fertilize my other system. I'm getting all these yields, and I only get 300 pounds of beef. See? Oh, you're getting lower yields, but the more total additive yields to it. The trick is, how do we design systems so that we can manage it that way?
How many more acres in the Midwest could use your system?
Here's my perspective on that. On every single acre of ground that used to be a perennial ecosystem that's now in annual agriculture, let's convert it back to perennial ecosystem. That's all of it. One of the other things is now land. World Resources Institute, as a matter of fact, and Union of Concerned Scientists did an analysis of the tropics alone. There's over 100 million square miles of former tropical forest that's been denuded, went to annuals, and now has been abandoned. That's perfect. That's a perfect opportunity for restoration agriculture development. We go in, we buy the crappiest land around using ecological process of plant succession. You've seen cliffs growing algae or lichens, then mosses, then grasses, and eventually trees. The trees growing right out of the rocks. That's a perfect opportunity for a different kind of agriculture, not plowing the soil.
Sorry to interrupt, being mindful of the time. So we have about 5 minutes until the lunch break, and the lunch is very short, and we have a lot we want to kind of accomplish in that time. So just to make sure that we've heard from everybody, and I also know that David and Tim have many opportunities to talk, but I think others would like to hear. So if we can just address it, sorry panel, kind of quickly, and then just hear from the last two speakers, that would be great. So
the answer is we are getting closer to parity on a lot of things. There are many new proteins that are being explored, and as that happens, we are able to find very nutritious, functionally beneficial, and affordable proteins. And some of the exploration of that is like in certain seaweeds and algae that we're producing new products out of that have better PDCAS in terms of protein digestibility and better nutritional and functional benefits, and can be produced at par with beef, if not for the fact that there are huge subsidies that we need to fight and externalize costs in other areas.
So, to answer your question about livestock alternatives, I'm not a big fan of the veggie burger. So it's probably my least favorite item to serve. I always thought of it as just a strange thing to try to put together beans and beets and make a burger-looking patty. I prefer to serve vegetables in their more natural form if I can. But I'm intrigued by this idea of protein options, and I think it's very interesting if there are, things that have the texture of chicken. Why not? That sounds great.
Hi. I want to say, first of all, I'm a big fan of all of you at the podium, your work, used textbook in our class we taught here at Princeton. The point I want to bring up is that as we worry about climate change, the sustainability of the planet and the human race, one of the key issues is that our cropland is disappearing at an exponential rate. Last 30 years, we've lost 30% of the world's cropland. The number one reason for that is not erosion, well, you might expect it to be. It's actually asphalt or development. The problem that the net present value of an acre of farmland, flat cropland, as a development to put up condos or apartment buildings is tremendous windfall profit. It cannot compete with the net present value of grain, agriculture, land, which maybe makes $50 a year of acre before subsidy. On the other hand, some of the organic and holistic systems can produce 50,000, 60,000, 80,000 an acre of cash flow, which then becomes a financial, which actually a pivot point that tilts things. That's far greater. I wonder if anybody care to comment on, again, we're losing our cropland at an exponential, we may starve before we fry. So my point is, if we have these more advanced regenerative systems that can create an economic value greater than their destruction through asphalt, is that not one of the things we should be focusing on? Thank you.
I'll just comment down on that quickly. I'll turn it over. Restoration Agriculture Development. I'm a real estate developer, really. People don't believe it. People don't believe it. And what's happening now with a lot of these developments is you'll put in, oh, we're going to do sustainable agriculture. So you get some poor starving hippie girl to come in and grow a quarter-acre garden. She works her buns off and she produces a couple 100 pounds of vegetables. That's not agriculture. We need food 2-3 times a day. So we need large acres. So part of what we do is we do a design of a development, for example. Somebody bought this land. It's not prime farmland. We integrate the built environment with the living environment and make the whole entire development an agricultural development, and somebody has a business running this large-scale operation on it. The idea is growing. It's at the hockey stick curve right now, and like any startup-type industry segment, we're starved for capital and starved for boots on the ground. We're not short on eagerness. I know there's several eager people in here I already know, so. Those some brief comments.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I'm actually going to Philly tonight to attend an event of urban farmers in Philadelphia. And I was just at PASA, and there's definitely plenty of eager want to be farmers. With less than 2% of our population being farmers, it's time to start talking about who's going to, start growing food. But I will make a point. You're absolutely right. It's interesting. I sort of work in a little microcosm around Lancaster County, and because so many Amish want to stay on their farms, it's just drove the values way up. And organic farming is about the only way a young guy can actually afford to buy a farm, and part of that is because of the regenerative. And part of that is because of the heroes that buy our products and are willing to pay for what it costs to produce good food.
Which I think is one of the questions that's come through on the screen about keeping our focus on carbon emission and global change, and also concerns of public health as far as obesity. We have, a more tilted organic panel, but the question here is the role of organic, or if that's cost prohibitive, can we still get to goals of human health and carbon reduction without organic or in a combination? And so I don't know if we have people
related to that is perennialism. You think about an annual crop, corn, whether it's chemically raised or organically raised. The organically is going to be more expensive. Well, what if we grew a perennial crop that you plant at once and it's there for, like a chestnut tree in Sicily that I went to and actually touched is 4,000 years old. What if I planted my crop now and I don't have to plant it again? That farm that you saw, I don't have to plant it again. It's done. And we designed the layout of it to capture the water, to spread it around, so the water management is in place. We use the plants that are adapted to the climate instead of almonds in the Central Valley of California. So we can address those issues by designing it in. Perennialism.
Yeah. On the bios, all of their emails are on there, and so I just don't want to shortchange lunch, the all-important next step. So I'm sorry, we've run out of time. And thank you to all the panelists.
Thank you.